The power of persistence. A person who was rejected in several job interviews and is now a CEO. Imagine being rejected time and time again, having your potential ignored, and yet continuing to fight for a dream that seems increasingly distant. Liam went through all of this. Countless interviews, closed doors, and constant doubts about his own worth. But what no one knew was that his greatest victory was about to happen, and it would be a turnaround that few could have predicted. How would a man who was rejected by everyone become the leader of one of the most powerful companies? Get ready to discover the power of persistence, where every no led him to a yes that would change his life forever. From a young age, Liam had always known he wanted more. He couldn't settle for the idea of going through life without leaving a mark. He wanted to be someone, not just another face in the crowd. He grew up in a small town where opportunities seemed limited, but his vision for the future was never small. While his friends were content with ordinary jobs, Liam dreamed big. He saw the business world as a vast field of possibilities, where success did not depend on one's background, but on the ability to fight for what one wanted. At 18, he made a decision that would shape his entire life. He wanted to be a leader. He wanted to occupy a prominent position where his ideas and decisions could transform not only his life, but the lives of many other people. And to do that, he knew he would need to enter the competitive world of large corporations. But what he didn't know at the time was that the journey he had chosen would not be easy. In fact, it would be one of the most challenging anyone could face. Liam was not just any boy. He was focused, intelligent, and had a burning ambition to succeed. His mind was always searching for strategies, for new ways of thinking about problems. But he soon realized that to get where he wanted to be, he needed more than just ambition. He needed to prove his worth in a market full of people as capable as he was, or even more so. And that was when he began to face the first obstacles on his journey. Liam's story is not just the story of a young man with big dreams. It is the story of an ordinary person trying to break through the invisible barriers that the world imposes. Those who knew him saw in him a vibrant energy, a desire to grow, but also a doubt. How can someone who comes from a simple background actually carve out a space? Among the giants? In the early years, Liam tried everything. He went to college, did internships, sent out hundreds of resumes, and finally, the moment came when he found himself at the doors of the companies he most wanted to work for. He prepared himself, studied, dedicated himself, and gave his best in every interview. But despite his efforts, something always seemed to be missing. He was good, but never good enough to be chosen. The words of recruiters always sounded the same. Unfortunately, it's not the right time. You have a great profile, but we need someone with more experience. And with each no, he felt an extra weight, as if his dream was getting further away. Liam wasn't ready to give up, but he also didn't know how to move forward. Each rejection seemed harder to digest than the last. How could he get where he wanted to be if, at every turn, the world seemed to say no? But even in his most frustrating moments, something inside him never died. There was something in his soul, a flame that insisted on shining, even in the darkest hours. He knew that if he was persistent enough, one day something would happen. He didn't know when, but he deeply believed that in time, his chance to shine would come. And deep down, Liam knew that difficulties were part of the process. He understood that all the great leaders, those he admired, had not reached the top by chance. They had failed, fallen, and most importantly, gotten back up. He needed to be able to do the same. He needed to be willing to move forward, even when the world seemed to say no. As time passed and he went through each unsuccessful interview, Liam matured. It was no longer just about what he wanted, but about what he was willing to face to achieve his dreams. He began to see rejections not as failures, but as opportunities to learn. Each no became a lesson, one more step toward becoming the person he knew he could be. He wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not after coming this far. Liam's dream was more than a professional goal. It was the search for a meaningful life, for a legacy that would not be forgotten. He didn't just want a job. He wanted to be someone who inspired others not to give up on their own dreams. He wanted to be an example that no matter how difficult the journey, there was always a reason to keep going, even when all seemed lost. But he knew that to achieve this goal, he would need to overcome one of the greatest challenges of his life: persistence. He would have to be stronger than any difficulty that came his way. He would have to be more determined than any no he received. And most importantly, he would have to believe that his vision was valid, even when no one else seemed to believe in it. Now, I invite you to think, what about you? Have you ever felt like Liam? Have you ever gone through a time when your dreams seemed distant and the doors always closed? We've all faced challenges, but what really matters is how we respond to them. True strength isn't about never falling, but about always getting back up. And this is where Liam's story begins to take a different turn. It's not just about the failures and obstacles, but about the strength he found to keep going. It's not just about what he lost, but about what he would achieve through the power of persistence. If this story inspired you, be sure to like this video. If you've faced similar challenges or know someone who could relate to this journey, share this message of strength and hope. And so you don't miss any stories like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Believe me, big turnarounds start when you decide to persevere. Liam sat at the coffee table, papers scattered before him. Resumes, cover letters, automated response emails. He had already sent dozens, maybe hundreds. Each of those written words represented hope for something better. He always prepared with the same intensity. He researched the companies, dressed impeccably, rehearsed his answers and his posture. But in every interview, the reality was the same. The recruiter's distant gaze, the friendly smile that hid indifference, the quick handshake at the end. The feeling that once again, he was there, trying to prove his worth, but being seen as just another candidate with no chance. The first time Liam was rejected, he tried to ignore the pain. After all, it was just an interview, right? But when the no came soon after, and then another, he realized that he was not dealing with something simple. Frustration began to build up, silently, like a weight he didn't know how to carry. Each rejection seemed harder than the last, and no matter how hard he tried to hide it, it hit him deeply. He began to wonder if there was really something wrong with him. What was missing for him to be chosen? Weeks passed, and despite all his efforts, reality seemed crueler than ever. He reviewed his answers, tried to rethink his approach, but every door that closed in front of him seemed to be saying the same thing. This isn't your place. The most distressing thing was that he knew he wasn't incompetent. He knew he had what it took, but no one seemed to see that. Liam began to realize that the rejections weren't just about him, but about something bigger. He wondered if the world out there really had room for someone like him. He didn't have a famous last name, he didn't have the right connections, and what hurt him the most was realizing that the only thing that seemed to matter to recruiters was what he didn't have: practical experience in a specific field. How could he gain experience if no one gave him the chance to start? The phone never rang when he expected it to. Just when hope seemed to grow, a new response would come, and with it a sense of defeat. Thank you for your participation, but we have chosen another candidate. Or sometimes, the lack of response spoke louder than any other words. The silence echoed in his mind, a constant reminder that maybe he wasn't good enough. And then came the most painful blow of all. A company he had prepared so hard for called him in for a final interview. He spent sleepless nights fine-tuning every detail, crafting the perfect answers, thinking about the future he so desperately wanted. When the day arrived, the room was cold, and the recruiter was formal and distant. He went through the interview with his heart pounding, but in the end, the answer was the same. We appreciate your time, but we've decided to go with another candidate. Those words, so simple and direct, cut Liam like a sharp blade. The impact was so great that he couldn't sleep that night. He lay silently, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The pain was different now. It was a deep pain, one that didn't go away with time. He felt as if the world had closed itself off to him once and for all. What hurt him most was knowing that he wasn't the only one facing this kind of rejection. He saw friends and colleagues who perhaps weren't as dedicated or as talented as he was, getting jobs easily. They were lucky to be in the right place, with the right connections. For Liam, this seemed like a distant reality, a dream he might never achieve. His days became marked by a constant feeling of frustration and doubt. With each new no, his confidence was shaken a little more. He wondered if he was doing something wrong. Was he not as prepared as he thought? Would his dream never come true? More difficult than the closed doors were the moments when he found himself alone, unsure if it was worth continuing to try. But deep down in his soul, Liam still had a spark, a quiet strength that told him not to give up. It was a force that was difficult to identify, but it was there, like a whisper urging him to keep going, even when life seemed to be telling him otherwise. He knew that no did not mean he was incapable, but rather that his time had not yet come. He did not know when, but part of him believed that yes was closer than he imagined. And so, Liam carried on. Even when each interview left him more exhausted than the last, he didn't stop trying, because deep down, he knew that true defeat was not in failing, but in giving up. The feeling of being stuck in an endless cycle of closed doors began to eat away at Liam from the inside out. It wasn't just about the interviews anymore. It was about the weight that the rejections were putting on his mind and heart. With each rejection, a piece of his confidence seemed to crumble, as if he were becoming lighter, less complete. He tried to be rational, tried to convince himself that rejections were just part of the process, a necessary step in his journey. But the recruiter's words echoed in his mind. Unfortunately, it's not the right time for you. You have a great profile, but you lack experience in... It was hard to ignore these thoughts. They came like shadows, a constant reminder that he was somehow falling short. Something inside him wondered, am I really ready for this? Will I ever be good enough? On one of the most difficult days, Liam looked in the mirror and, for a moment, couldn't recognize the reflection staring back at him. That confident young man who once dreamed of being a leader seemed distant. In his place was someone who no longer knew how to pick himself up. His eyes were tired, his shoulders slumped, and his expression seemed to have lost the energy it once had. What shook him most was not the fact that he was failing. He already knew it would be a long and arduous journey, but the growing feeling that something inside him was breaking. His self-esteem, once intact, began to crumble. Liam began to doubt his own abilities. He had knowledge, intelligence, and a clear vision of where he wanted to go. But with each no, he wondered, is this enough? Am I prepared? And with these questions came the deepest fears. Am I not good enough to achieve my goals? The weight of rejection was not only on his mind, but also on his heart. The frustration was increasingly difficult to control. He felt a growing pressure, an anxiety that woke him up in the middle of the night, tense and unsure of how to deal with the doubts that haunted him. There were times when he thought he just couldn't go on. He wondered if he was fooling himself, if this endless struggle was worth it, or if he should just give up and accept that his dream would never come true. And no matter how hard he tried to keep his composure, the pressure began to affect every aspect of his life. His friends, who had previously seen him as a source of energy and inspiration, began to notice his change. He didn't want to open up, but little by little it became impossible to hide the weight of rejection. Light-hearted conversations became uncomfortable moments, and even the small successes of others seemed to increase his sense of inadequacy. While they talked about their achievements and progress, he felt like he was being left behind, stuck in a place where there seemed to be no way out. But the worst thing was the silence that came when he was alone with his thoughts. When he was at home, in the tranquility of his own space, the doubts arose more strongly. It was in those moments that the internal struggle became more intense. He knew he had to keep going, but the constant doubt that maybe it was a mistake to keep trying left him in conflict. Can I really get there? Do I have what it takes? The rejections affected not only what he did, but who he was. He began to feel that his value was directly linked to his success in interviews, and that if he didn't succeed, it meant he wasn't good enough. He found himself increasingly distancing himself from people, trying to avoid conversations that reminded him that everyone else seemed to be moving forward, while he was stuck, trapped in the past of his failures. Each no seemed to chip away at his foundation, and he found himself in a constant struggle to rebuild his confidence. Still, there was a part of him that couldn't give up. Even in the most difficult times, he remembered his initial motivation, the dream of being a leader. He knew that to achieve something great, he would have to persevere. But how could he do that when every rejection seemed like proof that his dream was too far away to ever come true? However, something curious began to happen. Liam began to realize that rejection, although painful, was shaping him in ways he couldn't fully understand at the time. Each refusal was challenging him to grow in ways he couldn't have imagined. He was being forced to look at himself more honestly, to question his own limitations and fears, and most importantly, to face his own vulnerability. The internal struggle between persisting or giving up was intensifying. On the one hand, he felt that he had already invested so much time and energy that giving up now would mean losing everything he had fought for until then. But on the other hand, the rejections were making him wonder if he should try something different. Was continuing to insist the right thing to do? Or would it be better to seek a new path? With each new no, Liam was being tested. The impact of the rejections was not only in the momentary pain, but in how he reacted to them. What would he do with these wounds? Would he continue to fight, even if the chances seemed slim, or would he simply accept that perhaps his dream was impossible to achieve? These doubts stayed with him, persistent, like an internal storm. As he faced one of the most decisive moments of his life, he knew that, at that moment, his decision could define his future. But to do so, he would need to win his own battle, the one that was raging inside him. Liam was on the edge of the abyss. He felt that each rejection had accumulated like an impossible mountain to climb, a barrier made not only of closed doors, but of his own doubts and fears. The days dragged on, and the constant feeling of failure seemed to be a relentless shadow in his life. The nights were the worst. When silence took over the house and he was alone with his thoughts, the questions echoed louder. Was all this effort worth it? No matter how hard I try, will my dream always be a distant one? The pressure was becoming unbearable, and he felt the weight of expectations, both his own and those of everyone around him. He knew that his friends and family saw immense potential in him, but every time he looked at them, he saw something different in their eyes. A disguised concern, a silent expectation that he would finally find his way. They wanted to see him succeed, but Liam couldn't shake the feeling that he himself was becoming a kind of walking failure. However, amid this sea of uncertainty, something began to happen. He began to pause, not just a physical pause, but an emotional one. He sat alone in his apartment, looking out the window, the view of the illuminated city before him. The city lights, so distant, seemed symbolic to him. They were there, always present, but he would never reach them without continuing to try, without continuing to move forward, even when the path seemed obscured by the darkness of doubt. It was there, in that stillness, that Liam began to reflect on what really mattered. He thought about his dream, what had brought him here, what kept him awake during long nights of anxiety, what made him get up every morning, despite all the rejections. He remembered when he was younger, the sparkle in his eyes as he imagined himself leading a team, making decisions that would change lives. That dream, that clear vision of a possible future, was still inside him, more alive than ever. But he also realized something he had ignored until then. This dream would not be achieved by luck or a simple yes from a recruiter. It would be achieved through persistence. Liam began to understand that the real obstacle was not closed doors, nor his lack of experience or the doubts of others, but rather his own willingness to continue. If giving up now meant abandoning everything I've always wanted, is it worth it? He asked himself. The answer that came, slowly and firmly, was a deep resonance within him. No, giving up was not an option. He wasn't going to abandon everything he believed in, everything he had dreamed of, because of a few difficulties along the way. He knew that true success didn't come easily. It came with perseverance. But this realization did not come without a cost. He had to face his own weaknesses, his own fears. He had to accept that the process would be difficult, and that today's no did not mean a definitive no forever. Each rejection was an opportunity to learn, to improve, to become someone stronger. And most importantly, he learned that failure was not a reflection of who he was, but rather a natural part of the path to success. Failures would not define him. What would define him was his ability to keep going, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. Liam then made a decision that would change his life forever. He would commit, unwaveringly, to not giving up. He refused to let rejection steal his dream. He knew the journey would be long and full of obstacles, but he was ready to keep going, no matter how difficult it might be. Today's no didn't mean he should stop. It was just part of the process, a necessary step to achieve what he wanted. The moment that decision took hold, Liam felt an internal shift. The weight of the rejections was still there, but now he saw it differently. Instead of viewing the no's as something negative, he saw them as signs that he was on the right track. The more he tried, the closer he got. He knew that the real test was not the number of times he failed, but the number of times he got up and tried again. He would not allow past defeats to define his future. The decision to persevere also meant taking control of his own thoughts. He began to free himself from the negative voices that told him he wouldn't be able to do it. He understood that his greatest enemy was not the recruiters, nor the closed doors, but his own mind. He needed to change his mindset. It would no longer be about what he didn't have or couldn't do. It would be about what he could achieve if he kept fighting. This change in perspective strengthened him in a way he never thought possible. It was with this new commitment in mind that Liam began to redefine his journey. He understood that to be successful, it wasn't enough to just have the dream. It took the courage to fight for it, day after day, even when the world around him seemed to doubt him. What separated him from success wasn't a lack of skill or experience, but his willingness to persevere against all odds. Now, more than ever, Liam knew that the only way forward was to keep going. It didn't matter how many doors were closed, nor the difficulties he would still face. What mattered was his determination to continue, without looking back. He had committed himself to something greater than the simple desire for a job. He had committed himself to his own story of overcoming adversity. Now, with a clearer mind and a stronger heart, Liam was ready to face whatever the future held. He knew that in the end, persistence would be his greatest ally. After months of failed attempts, sleepless nights, and countless rejections, something changed. It wasn't a grand announcement or a big call. It was something simple, discreet, but it made Liam's heart beat faster. An email. Nothing extraordinary in the subject line, but the words in the body of the message were an invitation he never imagined he would receive. Dear Liam, after reviewing your resume and cover letter, we would like to invite you for an interview. He read the message a few times, feeling incredulous. The company name was familiar, of course. He knew it. Was one of the big ones. But the fact that they were interested in someone like him, someone who had been rejected by so many others, seemed almost like a mistake, a glitch in the system. Are they confusing my profile with someone else's? He thought. It was one of the most renowned companies in the field he wanted to work in, an organization that seemed so distant, as if its founders were on a completely different planet, in a world he could never reach. A company that, for Liam, was at the top of the pyramid, And now, somehow, he was being invited in. It seemed surreal, a stroke of luck he didn't know he deserved. But he knew what to do. He had committed himself to not giving up, and this was the opportunity he had been waiting for so long. The only thing left was preparation. Liam wasted no time. He felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, but he knew he couldn't allow himself to falter. Every detail had to be perfect. He locked himself in his apartment, surrounded by books and notes, redesigning every aspect of his preparation. He reviewed the company's history, studied every product, every service, every corporate value. This wouldn't be just any ordinary interview. It would be the opportunity he had always known would come one day, and he couldn't let this chance slip away because of another silly mistake. As the days passed, his nervousness only increased. Each new rehearsal in front of the mirror was more difficult than the last. He wanted to be perfect. He wanted to show, once and for all, that his vision and skills were not just a reflection of his will, but something concrete, something that could make a difference in the company. Every word he said to himself was rehearsed, but loaded with truth. He talked about his passion for innovation, about how he believed that good leadership is built through collaboration, about his experience with challenges, and above all, about how much he had learned during all the no's he had faced. With each rehearsal, however, a new doubt arose. What if I fail? What if, no matter how much I prepare, my anxiety betrays me? He knew that this would be the biggest interview of his life so far, and the weight of it pressed on him more than any other moment. He knew he would be confronted not only with the interview questions, but with his own inner fears. It was a test not only of his professional ability, but also of his personal courage. He didn't just want to be seen as a good candidate. He wanted that recruiter to see the strength and determination he had built up over all those months of struggle. The day of the interview finally arrived. Liam looked at himself in the mirror, put on the suit he had bought with so much sacrifice, and did the only thing he could. He took a deep breath. You deserve to be here. You got here through your own strength. Don't let your doubts get the better of you. Those words echoed in his mind. He couldn't let his nervousness get the better of him. He was there to win, to show that, despite all the obstacles, he was exactly what that company needed. The company's waiting room was imposing, with huge windows overlooking the city, and the modern designer furniture exuded the feeling that he was facing a world to which he did not yet belong. He sat down, trying to control the nervousness that was taking over his hands. When he was finally called in for the interview, Liam's heart raced, but he knew he couldn't let himself get carried away. Each step to the recruiter's office felt like an endurance test. The recruiter was a middle-aged man, serious but with a demeanor that did not seem intimidating. The atmosphere was quiet, almost clinical, and Liam couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine as he entered. But soon, he was sitting across from the recruiter, and the conversation began. The questions came fast and sharp, but Liam was prepared. He knew the answers. He knew what he needed to say. He spoke sincerely about his career path, about the challenges he had faced, about the failures he had overcome, and, most importantly, about what he had learned from each of them. With every word he spoke, the tension surrounding him began to ease. He felt that the recruiter was beginning to see beyond the simple resume, beyond those failures that so many others had focused on. He felt that he was being heard, that he was finally being given the opportunity to show who he really was. But the tension was still there, a shadow that wouldn't leave him completely. When the interview came to an end, the recruiter smiled slightly and asked the question Liam had been dreading. What if I told you we have some more experienced candidates? Liam's heart froze for a second, but he knew what he had to do. He looked the recruiter in the eye, without hesitation, and said with all the certainty in his heart, I may not have all the experience, but I know that my willingness to learn, my ability to adapt, and above all my determination, are the qualities that will make a difference here. The recruiter looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. And then, to Liam's surprise, he smiled. Well, Liam, That's exactly what we're looking for. Let's take it a step further. It was at that moment that Liam felt that something was about to change for him. The opportunity he had never imagined receiving was finally within his reach, and he had taken the first step toward securing his future. The only thing he knew for sure was that persistence had finally brought him the chance he had fought for. Liam's phone rang once again, but this time it was different. The unknown number, which had previously caused him anxiety, now made him feel a wave of anticipation. When he answered, the voice of the recruiter who had interviewed him weeks earlier sounded friendlier, almost familiar. Liam, we would like to offer you the position of development analyst on our team. Congratulations, you've been selected. For a moment, Liam was silent, unable to believe what he was hearing. He looked around, as if seeking external confirmation that this was really happening. Those words he had longed to hear, that he had always imagined hearing in his wildest dreams, were finally being spoken. He had achieved what seemed impossible, the opportunity to work at his dream company. He smiled, feeling a mixture of relief, euphoria, and even a little disbelief. I accept. Thank you so much, Liam managed to reply, his voice trembling with emotion. He hung up the phone and let himself fall onto the sofa, the feeling of victory spreading throughout his body. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew one thing for sure. This moment would change his life forever. In the days that followed, Liam couldn't believe he was about to start at one of the most respected companies in the industry. He reviewed the job details, studied everything he could about the company's projects and challenges, but something was on his mind that he couldn't ignore, the fear of failure. His doubts didn't disappear. Not all at once. He knew that the responsibility was now real. He was no longer a candidate. He was part of the team. He wanted to show, from day one, that saying yes had not been a mistake, that he was ready to face whatever came his way. The first day at the office was an overwhelming experience. Liam entered that impersonal environment, where everything seemed to function with almost surgical precision. People seemed to have a solid routine, a confidence in their abilities that he was still trying to build. Everyone was immersed in their work, and he felt for a moment a little lost among them. But soon the feeling of being in the right place took hold of him. He knew that this was the battlefield where he could finally prove that his value was real. What happened next was a real turnaround. From the very beginning, Liam began to stand out. Not because he was the most experienced, but because he was tirelessly dedicated and committed. He brought with him the energy of someone fighting for a chance that seemed impossible. He gave himself completely to the projects, volunteering for challenging tasks, asking for help when necessary, but always looking for solutions to the problems that arose. He exceeded expectations, not only fulfilling his duties, but always looking for ways to contribute to the team. His first major project involved optimizing an internal company process that had been facing some obstacles. It was a complex task that required analytical thinking and the ability to work under pressure, exactly the kind of challenge Liam knew how to handle. During the week of preparation, he spent hours analyzing data, testing different approaches, and sharing his ideas with colleagues. By the end of the week, the results were impressive. The process, which had previously been delayed and inefficient, was significantly optimized, saving the company time and resources. His superiors were impressed with his dedication and the way he had approached the problem so meticulously and creatively. But what really caught everyone's attention was his attitude. While many of his colleagues limited themselves to fulfilling their responsibilities, Liam gave himself body and soul. He had a unique energy, a willingness to go the extra mile that did not go unnoticed. He wasn't just there to fill a position, he was there to make a difference. This passion and commitment quickly began to earn the trust of his superiors. They realized that they had not only hired someone with technical potential, but someone who possessed a rare vision, the ability to overcome obstacles, learn from mistakes, and grow amid challenges. In a meeting with the head of the department, Liam was surprised to be publicly praised for his performance. "Liam," said his superior, You have shown something that many here fail to realize, an unwavering commitment to the company and to your own growth. We are very happy to have you on our team." These simple but powerful words were confirmation of something Liam already knew. He was on the right track. He had achieved his first victory, not only through hard work, but through the way he devoted himself to his role, the way he showed that he not only belonged there, but that he was ready for much more. The confidence he gained over the following months led him to take on increasingly challenging projects. He began to be seen as someone his colleagues and superiors could rely on to deliver exceptional results. With each new project, each new opportunity, he stood out more, showing that his persistence, positive attitude, and ability to overcome difficulties had finally paid off. But what Liam didn't know was that his journey was just beginning. What he had achieved so far was only the foundation on which he would build something much greater. He had already earned the respect and trust of his team, but in his mind, the biggest challenge was yet to come, proving to himself that he could be not just a good employee, but a leader. And to do that, he would have to continue to grow, learn, and fight every day for the chance to make an even bigger difference. And so, Liam's story continued, now with renewed certainty. He knew that the battle against his own insecurities was far from over, but the victory over rejection, over the fear of failure, and over his own limitations, made him increasingly strong. He had taken the first step toward achieving not just a position, but a true legacy. And with the same strength and determination that had brought him this far, he knew that his future was in his hands. Liam's journey within the company was marked by steady growth and a rare ability to turn challenges into opportunities. When he joined the company, he was no longer the young man who felt lost in his first interviews. He was now shaped by experience, by failures, and especially by the lessons he had learned from each obstacle. From day one, his attitude was not that of a simple employee trying to do his job. It was that of someone who understood that true leadership begins with a willingness to learn and contribute to collective success. Liam didn't just do his job. He delved deep into each project, thought of creative solutions to old problems, and sought to improve processes that, for many, were just part of the routine. He knew that to stand out, he had to go above and beyond expectations. And so, with this proactive spirit and tireless dedication, he began to attract the attention of his superiors. His first major achievement, after optimizing the internal process, was helping to resolve a major impasse in one of the company's divisions. One of the main sales teams was struggling with an unexpected drop in performance. The traditional marketing approach was not working, and the numbers continued to fall month after month. Without hesitation, Liam offered to help, presenting a detailed analysis of market behavior, reviewing previous approaches, and suggesting a new sales strategy based on more in-depth customer data. He worked side by side with the team, suggesting real-time adjustments, training salespeople, and helping to adapt the strategy as the market changed. Not only was the team's performance restored, but before long, they were exceeding their targets. This kind of attitude was instrumental in Liam's rise within the company. He didn't just accept the status quo. Instead, he questioned, innovated, and, when necessary, strategically corrected course. His superiors began to realize that he not only had the ability to solve immediate problems, but to anticipate future problems and implement solutions before they became major challenges. Over the years, his reputation grew. Liam became known for his ability to make decisions based on hard data and his long-term vision. While many of his colleagues focused on short-term solutions, he always thought about the future impact of his actions. This was especially evident in his strategic decisions, such as when he led an internal restructuring that not only optimized communication between departments, but also significantly increased the company's productivity. The changes he implemented were not just about improving immediate numbers or results. They had a vision of transformation. He wanted to build a more agile, more collaborative, and more focused organization for long-term development. His strategic approach was also demonstrated in how he dealt with crises. In times of economic uncertainty, When many in the company were concerned about short-term sustainability, Liam was always looking for ways to turn the situation around, thinking not only about the immediate future, but also about how to reposition the company for the long term. His calmness under pressure, coupled with his ability to communicate his ideas clearly and effectively, led him to be seen not only as a great employee, but as a true leader. The most decisive moment in his journey came when the company underwent a period of restructuring and a major change in leadership. The previous CEO, who had been a central figure for years, announced his retirement. The company's senior management began a selection process for a new leader, and Liam found himself, for the first time, facing a great opportunity. But instead of hesitating or feeling intimidated by the magnitude of the position, he saw it as a chance to apply everything he had learned throughout his career. He knew he wasn't the only candidate. There were others who were more experienced and more visible within the company, but something inside Liam drove him forward. He reflected on his journey, on what had brought him there, and understood that his ability to make strategic decisions was not only based on his numbers or past results, but on his vision for the future. He understood the company in a unique way, from the inside out. He knew where its strengths lay, but also the areas that needed change. He had the vision and commitment to transform the company into something even bigger, more innovative, and capable of adapting to constant market changes. Liam was called to a meeting with the executive board. It wasn't just any meeting, but one of the most important of his life. He knew this would be his chance to present his vision for the future of the company. When he entered the room, he was more prepared than ever. He not only explained the results he had achieved, but also presented a bold plan for the company's growth over the next 5 years. He spoke passionately about innovation, new market possibilities, and the need for a more dynamic and inclusive organizational culture. After a long period of deliberation, the board met to announce its decision. Liam stood looking at the horizon, waiting anxiously. When the chairman of the board announced his appointment as the new CEO, Liam felt as if the ground had opened up beneath his feet. He knew that this moment was the culmination of a journey that had begun with rejection and doubt. Now he had achieved not only a leadership position, but recognition of his vision, his ability to overcome adversity, and his skill at inspiring others to strive for something greater. As CEO, Liam not only remained focused on financial results, but always had the vision to build something sustainable and lasting. He implemented structural changes, invested in the continuous development of employees, and promoted a more collaborative and inclusive work environment. Under his leadership, the company not only expanded, but repositioned itself in the market, becoming a benchmark for innovation and organizational culture. What he didn't know when he started at that small company was that the most important lessons in his life were not about getting a yes from a recruiter, but about being able to get up after every no and stand firm, believing in himself and his purpose. Liam's rise to the position of CEO was not only a professional victory, but proof that persistence, dedication, and long-term vision can transform not only a person's career, but also the history of an entire company. Liam's journey was just beginning. He knew that new challenges would come, but now, more than ever, he was prepared to face them, with the same courage, wisdom, and strength that had brought him this far. When Liam reached the position of CEO, he believed that the greatest challenge of his career was behind him. After all, he had overcome endless rejections, challenged his own limitations, and finally achieved what seemed impossible. However, the real test was about to arrive, and it would come in an unexpected way. A crisis that would put everything he had built at risk. It was a morning like any other, until an urgent email arrived. The company was facing a serious financial crisis. One of its largest contracts had been abruptly canceled, and to make matters worse, Investor A. Confidence was plummeting. The company's stock plummeted, and rumors of bankruptcy began to surface in the major news outlets. What had seemed like a smooth and secure victory was now about to crumble before Liam's eyes. The pressure was instantaneous, a pressure he had never experienced before. He knew that if he couldn't turn the situation around, his career would be marked by this failure. More than that, he felt that his personal confidence, the very pillar on which he had relied until then, would be destroyed. It was at that moment that Liam found himself at a breaking point. He could succumb to the pressure, take the easy way out, and assume that perhaps he had come too far for someone who started from such a low place. But something inside him, that persistent flame that had always motivated him, burned even brighter. He hadn't fought so hard to simply give up. He was no longer the insecure young man who questioned himself after every rejection. He was a leader, and leaders could not afford to fail without fighting until the very last moment. With a sense of urgency, Liam gathered his top executives and sprang into action. He knew it wouldn't be easy. Instead of giving into panic, he used the crisis as an opportunity to rally everyone around a shared vision. He knew he would need to be transparent, precise, and above all, inspiring. Without hesitation, he gave a rousing speech to the entire company. We didn't get this far to give up. Each of us has faced challenges. We've faced closed doors and missed opportunities, but we never gave up. We're not going to start now. Let's come together, and together, we'll find the solution. This moment of vulnerability and courage not only motivated his team, but also brought out a collective strength that no one knew existed. Liam implemented rapid changes, restructured the marketing department, renegotiated contracts, and most importantly, restored investor confidence with an honest and transparent approach. He worked tirelessly through sleepless nights, making difficult decisions, but always with a clear vision in mind, to save the company and restore hope to his employees. It was an intense battle. There were months of uncertainty, but in the end, the real victory was not just in restored financial stability. The real victory was in how Liam weathered the storm. He not only rebuilt the company, but also rediscovered himself as a leader. He understood that, more than strategic skills or the ability to make quick decisions, being a true leader meant being resilient in the face of adversity, maintaining the confidence of his team when all seemed lost, and never, ever losing faith in himself. Liam emerged from this crisis stronger than ever. Not only had he saved the company, but he had also proven to himself that the greatest achievement was the confidence he had regained. Adversity had not broken him. It had made him stronger. More than just the CEO of a company, he became a living example that true victory is not about never falling, but about always getting back up. And so his story became a symbol of perseverance, unshakable faith, and confidence forged in the most difficult moments. Liam didn't just reach the top. He overcame his own limitations, transformed himself, and showed that true leadership is not only about victories, but about how you deal with defeats. Now, Liam's true victory was no longer about a position or a contract or a number on the balance sheet. His victory was in his ability to believe in himself, even when all seemed lost. He knew that true strength did not come from having everything under control, but from knowing that, even without control, he was able to stand firm. And if you, like Liam, have experienced moments of doubt, or have felt that adversity could be greater than your strength, remember, true strength does not come from avoiding falls, but from getting up every time the ground seems to give way. So, if you believe in the power of persistence, in the value of never giving up, enjoy this video, share this message of strength with those you love, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one, because your journey could also be the next great story of overcoming adversity.